Hello Natroners, and welcome back to another episode of VFX with Natron. Alright, so today we have another really interesting episode, at least in my opinion it's interesting. Today we're going to be looking into building something that a lot of people in Natron really want, but don't realize they already have, which is a distortion system. We're going to actually build something. A lot of people want to distort things, move things around, make them warp around, and we have, the only thing we really have is, well, we have iDistort. That's the main thing that we're going to use. There are a couple other nodes that sort of can do this type of thing, and there are other ways of doing it. But today we're going to be focusing on taking what we have and making it work in an interactive way so that you can actually manipulate things and animate them. Animate! Alright, let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's take a look at what today's goal is, alright? And we're going to watch it one more time just to be on the safe side. So, the key thing here is we wanted to, that was a simple, first of all, that is a simple animation. We're in Natron, we have Natron, and so I'm going to just talk about some things. First things first, we need to start with something to distort. And before we jump into trying to animate a face, and that was a simple animation, by the way, that was only a test of concept, not a thing. You could do this, you can expand it. This is completely expandable. You're going to love this, I think. Anyway, we need something to start with. The easiest thing to start with, in my opinion, is color bars. And so we're going to take and get ourselves some color bars and hook them up to our viewer node. And of course, we need a way of comparing what we distort to what we have. So I'm going to create a merge node, keep this as my source. And then what we're going to do is, of course, put in our iDistort. And we're going to hook that up into our A input. And then we're going to feed the color bars in as our source. And one of the things we're going to notice is, well, right now, the iDistort isn't showing anything because we don't have anything feeding the UV layer. So what are we going to start off with? Well, this is the one time I'm going to tell you, start with do not use a constant for this. Alpha channel can really throw this off. We want a solid. Nothing else, a solid. Just start with a solid. This is going to be our background. And we're going to also play with it to see how it works with the iDistort node. So let's add a solid. All right. And we're going to plug that right into our UV. And the first thing we see is, of course, nothing is happening. We don't have any distortion going on. And if we grab the color value for our solid and we start dragging it up, nothing happens either. And that's because we haven't actually set the iDistort here to go up to anything or to have a value. So we're going to set it from scale of 1 all the way up to a scale of 100. And now if we go back to our solid and we start pulling it up, we can see that our image starts shifting, and it starts shifting diagonally as we go through between 0 and 1. So this isn't very useful, or at least it doesn't seem like it's very useful, but this is the way we've been using it for the most part, because most of the distorts we've been doing at this point have been very simple. But you'll notice that on the input for this iDistort node, it says UV. All right, why does it say UV? Well, we've talked about the fact that UV are polygonal terms for X and Y in a sense. They're relativistic. When the polygon turns in any which way, it's a coordinate system that can transform with a polygon. All right, and so typically U is the equivalent of X in a two-dimensional image, and V is the equivalent of Y. So it would be X being up and down, and Y being, excuse me, no, X being left and right, Y being up and down. Sorry, reverse them. All right. So, what this means basically is what the iDistort is actually doing is it's expecting two inputs. It's expecting a U input and a V input, and those inputs are actually translate in our world as red and green from the standpoint of the color. They're the first two inputs from our color channels. So if we go over here to our solid node and we change this to view it as three colors, if we take the green channel, the red channel, and we start moving this up and down, if we move it up and down, we'll notice that when I move it up to 1, the image moves to to the left of my screen, or to the left of our view, and if we move it to -1, it moves right. So this actually moves left and right. And if we do the green and we move it to up 1, it moves down. And if we move it to -1, it moves up. And these values, because these are not technically color-based, they're really not color-based, they're not influenced, we're just using the colors to drive them, we can actually exceed the values in our in this to basically move this in any direction we want. So I could take this, even though it's -1, I can pull it down further to -2, -3, etc., so on and so forth until it's off the screen. And the reason it's repeating is because, well, it's set to basically it's taking those end pixels and pushing them up beyond the edge of our screen in this case. All right. So, and we can do the same in the opposite direction. All right. So this is fine and dandy, but all we're doing is we're pushing this around. Well, one of the things I do want to bring up is the fact that because we've gone, as we can see over here in our little color value, we start off at black, and when we go to 1, it turns to green, and then that's as far, it never goes beyond green. We have no visual feedback from this as to what it's actually doing. So I highly recommend trying to keep this at a value between 0 and 1, but we're also going to do something else. Because what we have at this point is if we go in a negative, we get absolutely no feedback whatsoever that it's doing anything. So I like to work with a system that actually has a mapping system that we can work with, and we can at least get some visual cue to. So we're going to talk about how to do what's called an offset, and that is actually what this here is. All right, you'll notice here, all right, let's just take our merge node here, and we're going to set it down so that it's at 0.5. So we're looking at 50% of the original color bars and 50% of the iDistort output. So if we go back up here to our solid node and we start moving things, if I move the green up 1, we can actually see that it's pushed it down, and we can see the ghost image of the original after it. And so what we can say is, okay, well, green is supposed to be the equivalent of V because it's the second thing. So V is up and down, green is up and down. So what does this mean? Well, watch what happens when we start playing with this offset. As I move this up, because I set this to offset by 1, as I move this up back towards 1, it starts to compensate. It counters whatever I put in here. So when this gets to a value of 1, basically this has returned, or this has returned back to 0. Well, that means when I put this back to 0, the image is gone in the opposite direction. Well, that's no good, because that means we're still at the problem that it means that we've started at 1, and I can, if I start moving this down in negative increments, I can get it to move up as this goes from green to nothingness, but that also means that I'm at the same problem in the opposite direction. Basically, once I'm at 1, if I go up above 1, I don't get to see anything. So I have no visual feedback above green. So what we're going to do is, instead of setting this to 1, we're going to set these both, the U and the V, to 0.5. Well, actually, no, we're not. We're going to set it to 0. What we're actually going to do is we're going to keep it at 0, but instead, we're going to offset this in a different way. We're going to set the offset for the U and the V. All right, let's first of all set these both to 1. All right, the green value, and we're going to also set the red value to 1. That way, what we're seeing is we're seeing a diagonal offset, which is set to yellow. We see yellow up here, we'll see that it's offset by 1. And what we're going to do here in the iDistort is we're going to set this to 0.5. All right, so I'm going to go to I'm going to set it to 0.5, and I'm going to set the UV offset here to the U also to 0.5. All right, so we see it, and just so we're aware, if we set this, so what that's done is it's moved it halfway. So now we've moved away from it half a unit. So if I were to set these down, if the color down to half its value, to 0.5 and 0.5, then it lines up. So I get to, if I move up to 1, I get to see the movement in one direction, and if I move from 0.5 down to 0, I'll move in the opposite direction. So we get feedback. We start to see, we get visual feedback in our color channels, and this is going to be useful, but we're not actually going to be doing it with this. Originally, when I had come up with this, I decided I was going to work with 0.5, but it creates a lot of extra work that we have to do. So came up with a better solution when I originally did this. So we're going to set these both to 0, so it's offset. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to add ourselves an add node to this. So we're going to add, and we can see down here, add color. And what we're going to do is just set this to add 0.5 to the end result. So if we set this to 0.5, voila, we've automatically set it. And this is going to be the last node in our chain. All right. So now I start off with my color node here at 0. And as I move it up, we can see when I get to 0.5, I've actually moved it up to 1. And if I move it down to negative 0.5, I've moved it to 0. All right. And how do we know that we've done this? Well, let's look at it. All right, let's take this and we'll set this to negative 0.5. Oh yes, and the reason that it's looking like blue right now is because the blue is also influencing it. So we'll leave blue at negative 5. All right, so when the solid is set to negative 5, which we're not going to leave it at negative 5. We're going to actually be just leaving it at 0. But when it's at negative 5, we have black, all right? So, truth be told, if we just reset this to all, we'll just reset them all to 0, all right? So we have gray. We have 50% gray, 0.5. Why? Because this add node has added 0.5 to it. If we disable it, we are actually starting off the solid at black, all right? But by having this I node here, when we look at the result of this, or the result of it here, when we enable this, it sets it back to its default position, all right? And this is going to be useful, all right? And the reason it's going to be useful is because what we want to do is we want to add something into this that's going to work from this gray point and move it one way or the other, and that we can check in on and make sure, see it visually, get some idea, if we look at the ultimate end result, what it's actually doing. And this will become apparent. So what are we going to use to distort with? Well, the obvious thing, or the thing I like to use, is actually going to be a radial. We're going to put a radial node after the solid node, and we're just going to keep adding radial nodes. These are going to work as magnetic influences, or warp influences technically. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put a radial here. not radial. There we go, radial. And we can see that the radial by default is set so that it's at a value of 1. Well, we're going to set that value to, we're going to set this so that it's a value of 0. Oh, wait, 1, we're going to set it to 0. Then we're going to set it so that we take its alpha up to 1. All right? And so, yes, I do. Well, that turned everything off. All right? And I wanted to do this so that we can see what's going on. First of all, I'm going to disable the add node for the moment so that we can see. What I'm going to do from now on, we're going to mostly be playing with turning either the green channel up to 1, the green channel to -1, which doesn't show anything currently if we without the add channel. But if we enable the add channel, enable it, we can see we wind up with this magenta. So when I go to 0, it's gray. 1, it's a greenish color, or higher than that, it's greenish colors. And when I go negative, I get, we can see our influence. So by doing this, I've created a system where I get visual feedback at this point in time of what's going on. All right? And what that ultimately does is back here, when we look at the result of our iDistort, let's see what happens here. I go 1, and lo and behold, our image is distorted, and it's using our radial's fall off because this is a ramp. All right, it's a smooth ramp, and we're going to prove this we're going to split the view horizontally, and we're going to add a viewer in here. We're going to add a new viewer here off to the side, and we're going to take, just trying to think of how I want to do this. I'm actually going to do it off here for the moment. Put a period, put a period here. So that we have this broken off on the side over here. All right. And the reason we're going to do that is because, actually, I'm going to get back in here. What we're going to do is put waveform in here. And we're going to put the waveform, you know, we've done this. We did this in the very first episode so that we can see what this actually is doing. All right. So we're not seeing a perfect waveform, but what we're seeing here is that the influence, what this radial is doing is it's smoothly starting off and ramping up gradually, or blending it in, and then it gradually it ramps up very steep, and then it gradually falls off as it gets to the top. Now we know that this is not set correctly. This is currently set to a gamma of 2.2, which is not what we actually are. We want it to be a gamma. This is actually a display gamma of 1 because we're working in linear space. So this is the actual what we really have here. So this is what our actual influence, these radial influences, are looking like. This is our warp fields, so to speak. Okay, so we're going to call this warp field distortion. This is the way we're going to be manipulating things. All right, and the way we're going to do it is we're going to just take this and we're going to go back here. Let's take our original viewer node, hook it up. Whoops, that's not the right viewer. Sorry, this viewer. Boink, there. All right, so we're looking at the result out of here, so we can see our color and our distort coming out of our distort, seeing how they work relative to one another, and then we're going to just play with this a little bit. All right, so I'm going to take my green. I'm going to take it down to 0. Now, notice here in our viewer node, it's gone to nothingness. We don't see anything. Oh, that's odd. We should have a value of 0.5. Just want to make sure something. That's weird. Why don't we have... This is 0.5. All right, wait a minute. Hold on. Got a green of 1. Oh, right. We want to go... Well, 0 is... Well, I'm not thinking about this. I'm still thinking of it the old way. All right. When I go to negative, we can see that we have that. We've got our color there. And so we go negative. All right. So what we're going to actually do is go here. We're going to have the output of a waveform show us this from this point. So we can see the actual warp field as it actually works. All right. When we're in a positive, this moves it down. When we're in a 0, it's flat. No influence, and when we go negative, we get the invert and it moves up. All right. So that's what's happening here. We can see that with our waveform here. We're going to just keep the waveform off to the side as we do this, just so we can have something. All right. Now, we're going to also take this and we're going to go back down. Whoops. We can see that as we increase it, it increases it. All right. So now if we do the red, we go negative. It pushes it to the right. And if we go to the positives, it moves it to the left. All right. So we've got a full interactive system so we can see how the influences work. Oh, yes. And if we want to move at a diagonal, all we do is we move in the diagonal. We add a 1 into both of these and we can see we moved in a diagonal. Now, it might not be that obvious with this color bars. So what I'm going to actually do here, over here, is switch from using the color bars. We're going to put in a checkerboard. So we're going to put the checkerboard over here and we're going to just take and we're going to actually hit a period over here so that we only have to deal with one output. And there we go. All right. We can see the output of this radial node now as it is affecting this. All right. So let's see what happens when we go down to 0 and 0. All right. So here is our warp. We're looking at a warp, directly at our warp, our iDistort of this. If we increase our warp by 1, we've moved to the left. All right, with the red, we can see it warping, and we can see it relatively warping. All right, now we're seeing the two mixed together. So now if I'll move the green up 1, it's moved it diagonally down. We can see right here in the center point, this yellow line here. Let's make that yellow line a bit thicker so we can actually see it nice and big. We can see that it's been warped diagonally down at a 45-degree angle. If I want to move it less than 45 degrees, all I have to do is move one of these up or down. The green, if I move my green up, I can see that I can change the angle by just upping it and reducing or increasing this. All right. So I can increase it up to 1, and then I'll get up to 1 here, and I want to now make my red pull towards the center more. So all I've got to do is pull it. Whoops, not full unit. We pull it back in increments of 1, and we can see we can decrease it in that direction until we get back to the center. So we can gain access moving this in a full 360 degrees. Now, it isn't normalized. Normalized means that it's a perfect circle. We're not doing a perfect circle. But we really don't need it. What we're going to be dealing with these influences as setting it up so that we'll be animating this in a different way. We're not going to be animating these values. We're going to animate it in a clever way so that it always works perfectly. All right. So let's just, for now, we're just examining how this influence works. All right. So now as I go take the red in a negative, we can see that I move out until I get to -1, which is my 45-degree mark, at which point I want to take my green in the negative values until it gets back to 0, which will put it at the 0 line. And then I can keep going back until I get to -1. And again, these don't matter. We can, as long as we keep both of these within the same parameters, we can basically, whoops, I went the wrong direction. We can see we can gain full access just by adjusting these values to a full 360 degrees of the entire thing. We just went in a full, whoops, yes, full 360 degrees. We just warped that in full 360 degrees, even though it wasn't, as I'll say, normalized, which means it would be perfectly even, perfectly round. We could do math, but I'm not going to get into do radian math here. It makes my brain hurt. All right. But somebody may want to do that if they want to be clever and add in the radian math to get normalized values for vectors and so forth. Anyway, all right. From a user standpoint, this works perfectly fine. And we're going to prove it. We're going to do a few more things. So we've just demonstrated we get a full 360 degrees of warping capability. All right. Well, now the big question is how do we move this influence? Believe it or not, we already have the ability to do that. If we just go back to our radial here, let's go back and we're going to look at the iDistort directly now. All right. So right now our radial is this big, beastly, ugly influence that's not circular, it's not anything. But this is great. This means we have a shape. We have something, and we can change this shape. First of all, we want to change it so that on if you double click on the radial, you'll pull up the properties for it. And there's this checkbox here that says interactive update. And when we click this and we drag around on this, it means that as we drag around on this, it will propagate through the system. So what that means basically is without it on, when I turn it off, this is its default was off. When I pull it, nothing happens. We can see that the iDistort doesn't distort, and so we'll return it basically to beforehand. But when I turn on interactive update, lo and behold, as I pull this, we can see this iDistort starts pushing. It moves with us, and we get to see our distortion in real time. So we have a real-time influence, and we can pull this cage in any way, shape, or form and reshape our distort, our relative size of a distort, any way we want. Not only that, but we can grab the center point and pull it around anywhere we want. That means we have just created an interactive system we can see, and all we have to do to pick the direction that it works from is pick which ones of these values we use by how much red or green we have, basically values between 0 and 1, and we leave a warp or iDistort set to whatever value. I'm keeping it at 100. I recommend you keep it at 100, 0 to 100 most of the time. If you go beyond that, you start risking having the image distort back on itself, and you wind up with one side crossing over to the other side and getting weird, wonky things. So we want to keep these values fairly low. I'd recommend most of the time keeping the stuff no more than 1. All right. If you want to influence it more, use a second distort. And how do we do that? Well, all right. Let's look at this. Let's first of all make our size for our influence or radio. Let's make it uniform. All right. So we made it, and I'm going to make it a nice. Let's make it a nice 500 units for the sake of sanity. And we're going to set this to. I want to do 960 minus 250 because that's half of the distance. Or no, I don't. I want to do, wait a minute, 960, which is half of 1080. I mean, excuse me, which 960 is half of 1920, excuse me, minus our width of our influence. So I'm going to set it to, I think I want to make it, is that right? Yes, minus 500. Right, because this isn't the center point. This is the bottom left corner. Right. So remember, radials work off of the bottom left corner. We're moving the ROD, not the center point. That's the key difference. I was doing the math for the center point, not for the ROD. So this is good because we know that it's 500 units wide. We just subtract whatever this is from that, and we wind up moving it over. So then for this. For the center point, we just take half of whatever this value is, or vertical thing. So it's 240, so it would be 500 would be 250. So we set that to 250. Wait a minute, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? No, it's not. It's 540 minus 250, right? Is that right? Yes, because we want it at the halfway point. Yes. So it should be, I think it's 540. Which is half of 1080 minus 250. That should give us there we go. All right, I've moved that to the center point. I'm just doing that because I want to demonstrate something about this. All right, is that what I want? It's not quite. We're going to divide this by 2. The 460, let's see, in half would be, you know what? I'm going to actually do 960 minus, we're going to do 500 divided by 4. All right, that's not quite what I wanted, but that'll work. No. We're gonna go minus 500. No. Plus 250. Oh, what just happened? Oh, I overrode it. Oh, bah. All right. Let's try that again. Let's see. It should be. Oh, no, it should be. All right, 960. It'll be 960 minus 125. Minus 125? Or is it plus 125? Minus 125. No. Three 375. 960 minus 375. There we go. That's what I was after. Sorry, told you. And this is why I don't do the math for a lot of this stuff. Anyway, a lot of. So why are we doing this? Why did I take so much time to get it so precise? Because I want to actually have an exact same influence going in the opposite direction. So we want to. I'm gonna copy this because I want to get this exact thing. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna Alt C. All right. Which did not seem to do anything. Let's try that again. I'm gonna grab this radio. Make sure I have the radio selected in my node graph. While I'm moving my node graph, Alt C. There we go. We got a copy. And I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to drag this node in between, and that's going to put this node on top of it. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that when these things stacked, we didn't get quite, it's capping out. These are basically, they're not really adding together, so to speak, because if they added together, they would stack differently. Right now, they're just superimposing. They're overlaying. One is not going higher than the other, the other one was. But what we're going to do on the second one, the reason I wanted to do that is I want to take this and do 960 plus 125, which should put it. All right, no, 960 minus 125. That was what I wanted. All right, why did I want to do that? Why, indeed? I want to just show so we're very aware of what's going on here. We're going to try and influence it with the second one to pull it back, just to see if it's physically possible, because it gets a little wonky, all right? It is not perfect. Remember, the first influence is pulling things away. The second influence, we're going to try to pull things back. So we might have to overcompensate. And you need to be aware of this when you're distorting. This is one of the reasons I brought this up. It is not a perfect system, but it works very, very well. This works very, very well. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're at positive 1 for the R, so we're going to take it back to, well, let's go to negative 1. All right. So we're at 0. It has no influence. Negative 1. When we get to negative 1, we can see that we've wound up with something that's halfway between, but it isn't getting quite what we want, and we're getting very weird distortion. So what I would recommend at this point, let's reduce our influences just a little bit here. Let's take this from -1 to -0.5. Let's reduce this to, -0.5. And let's take this one down to 0.5. There we go. All right, so we see in this, and oddly, it's doing this, always acts different every time I use it, which is very weird. We can see that we're not getting quite the same influence. It's overcompensating as it's pulling to the right. So this one may be pulling too much. So we might just have to, let's make sure we're on the correct one. So we might have to take this and adjust it back in the opposite direction a little bit just to see. So we can see this is not a perfect system. It has limitations. It isn't perfect. We can't influence this perfectly this way. What we may have to do is instead of influencing with this one, go back to this one and try messing with this and seeing if decreasing or increasing that one does something. So anyway, we can see you might have some issues with it, but the whole point is that you can pull on these and mess with them and do this if you wanted to. It's not a perfect system. It's not as perfect as... There's honestly no perfect cage system, but this is a pretty good thing. We can see how it interacts. We can see... Actually, I could get something that almost looked right, just manually pulling this around until we get about there. I can pull this back about there. And it ain't perfect, but it's pretty good. Alright, anyway. I've dwelled on this aspect of it, trying to restore it long enough. We really want to get into doing a real thing. Let's pull in our actual face. I want over here. I've got a way pirate face over here, which is going to change, alter everything, and change where everything is. And we'll put this over here, and it's a wee bit weird. We're gonna crop this a bit. Let's just let's crop this. We're gonna add a crop node. Forgot this wasn't cropped, so let's see. We're gonna crop this down a little bit on this side. Doesn't matter, good enough. We'll drop. Whoops. We're gonna center it. Bump. And we're gonna crop down the height a little bit. Bunk. Center it. Oh, we need to crop it more. Let's try taking it down to 400. Let's center it. That's good enough. There we go. We've got that there. And for our output, because we want this to be... We want to make sure that this is outputting at the proper size. We want to... let's see. We're going to do... We're going to make sure that we're working on this. From here, we're going to put in a... See, we're going to merge it. Actually, we're just going to hit... what we're going to do here is we're going to put in a solid. And we're going to merge the solid with that crop right there. Nope, I don't want there. I want to get in here. There we go. And what we're going to tell this solid, we want to set this to a format of 1920 by 1080. And then we're going to tell... We're going to tell Natron that... oh yes, we're also going to put a transform after our crop node so that we can pull our face over to the side here a wee bit so we can readjust it as we want and see fit. There we go. And I'm debating whether I really want to do that beforehand. No, I didn't. I wanted this to all occur after. Alright, we want to actually feed... We want this here. No, I want this transform there. Excuse me. I do want that there. I'm just looking at what I want to do. I want to come out of this here. All right, we're going to do our final transformations after here. So we're going to add a transform onto here. So what this transform is going to be for is when we're done with this whole thing, I don't want two transform nodes. I'm going to do... This transform here is going to be used to move the image at the end. All right? That's what this one's going to be doing. And we're going to reset this all. Let's reset to default all dimensions. So this is in the center of our image. All right. And we're going to be painting over it here on our iDistort. This was just to position it in a play position that I want for the actual thing. So when I start distorting this, I know what's going on. So let's take a look at our iDistort here and go in and grab our radial. And what the heck is going on here? We want our solid here. We want to get it after we have merged. This has probably resized itself, so we want to send the... We actually want to send this solid over here as our... What we should do is just send this solid, use this one solid as our source to dictate the format. It will feed both our distortions and our transform, now that I'm thinking about it, because it's already set to the right size, which we need to set to our use for setting up our background for our radials. All right, and the reason for that is so that these are working in the correct space. We need these to work in the proper space when they come in here. All right. enough said with that. So we feed this in black, all right? And it's used here to, this is setting our ROD, our output ROD, for our project, all right? This is distorting, we're cropping it, then we're transforming it into a position, and then we're merging it over our solid, which gives us our final output so we can see it. And then we are bringing it in here, and we're going to iDistort it with that, and we're probably going to need to, I'm not going to worry. All right, the other thing we need to do is over here in our output format, we hit S, brings up our project settings. We're going to set this back to HD 1080 because that's my output resolution, and I want to make sure I'm outputting to HD. And just to ensure this also, as one last little bit, I also need to add a crop after this, because we may be moving things. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. You know what? I'm going to, no, I'm going to put it here. I'm going to just type in crop, just to ensure that this doesn't get set to a size too big. We're going to crop it. It's already set to 1920 by 1080. That is perfect. We should be perfect. Now, if we output from this point here, we can actually pull this away. We don't need that merge node anymore. Well, maybe we do. Maybe we want that merge node just so we can see, just in case we want to compare our undistorted to our distorted versions of this. All right, so here we are. We're back in our thing. We're going to disable these radials for the moment because you can already see they were influencing this. So what's the first thing we want to do? We want to go back here. Let's turn this off, the project settings. We're going to go over here to our first radial. We're going to enable it. We're going to go over here. First thing I think I want to do is I want to make this fella, he doesn't look very happy, so I want to pull up his eyebrow. So how am I going to do this? Well, first things first, I want to decide pulling up his eyebrow is moving upwards. So if I'm moving upwards, I obviously don't want to be moving horizontal, which is red. I want to be moving vertical, so I'm going to set the red to 0. I'm going to be setting my green. Up is, I believe, negative. So we look at this, and if I go -1, I say to myself, holy smokes, that's way too big. All right. And I'm going to just reduce this until it's, reduce it closer to 0 until I get an area. And I'm going to change my influence size until I get it over the part of my image that I want it to work over. All right. So I'm going to bring my distortion cage in, and I'm going to pull it right over this and right down here. And how much is my distort? That's 100. All right, good. All right, so we're going back here, and we can see this is just too much. So I'm going to reduce it more down until I'm down to something that I think is respectable, which is right about there. All right, let's see. I've pulled it. I don't want to pull up too much on this. I want to try and influence it. I want to see. So the goal here, the way we got to look at this is we got to look at the item that we're distorting. All right. I'm going to disable it. And what my goal here is to pull the thing up without distorting it. So I want it to influence the actual eye as little as possible. And I want to, what I'm trying to do is have this pull towards, all right, it's going to pull towards the center point. The center point is our, quote, maximum distortion level. So as I increase this, or decrease this, which is, actually 2 is probably as much as I really want to do here, I'm going to pull this down and up until I get something that I think pulls this up in the way I want it to look. All right, and I can sit here and I can just say, okay, did that pull it up? Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. That's pulled it up. It may not have pulled it up exactly how I want. I think he's not. It's pulling up in the wrong area. I think I want to pull it up more over here towards the side, center of his face, so that he's more sympathetic. Because that's the part of the brow that is more sympathetic. I feel like that might be enough of an influence. I don't even know if I want this to be that far. I don't want it to go too far over. I have to decide how much I want my side to side influence working. So there we go. All right. So there's my distortion there. And it looks like his eyebrow is going up. So he's more sympathetic. He's going to be smiling. You're never mad when you're smiling unless you're doing something really sinister. Like I'm thinking right now. I'm thinking about all the evil things, or good things, I could do with this. All right. So there's our first influence. All right. We've made it. We've created our first thing. All right. Our second influence. All this is it. We're taking things and we're saying, okay, well, I've done this. Here's a thought. Why am I redoing this? Why would I rebuild this same thing? So I'm going to take, for the other eye, I want the other eye to go up in a similar way. So I'm going to just start from this point because I know it's working here. I'm going to just hit Alt-C to copy this node. All right. So there we go. I'm going to hold Control. I'm going to put it in the middle. And you can see it did something weird there. It pulled it back in the opposite direction, which is kind of weird. That's not what we wanted. And I just want to make sure, I think, yeah, that's a bit odd. Well, anyway, we're going to just make sure, I don't want to grab the wrong one. I want to make sure this one is selected. I want to hide the other one, and I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to pull it over to this side. Now, that's weird. It is not operating. Oh! Wait a minute. Oh, I've made a boo-boo. The alpha on the radios should be 0. We do not want these to have any alpha. That's why we're getting wonky results. Do not enable the alpha. We want to keep the radios alpha 0. Oh my goodness. Oh, it's like I'm getting really weird results. All right. Let's just see something here. I want to disable this. Disable this. All right, this is not working as much influence as I had thought. Let me make sure, see what's going on here. Why am I not getting the result I'm expecting here? All right. This should be giving us. No. Wait a minute. Oh, no. We do want to give it a 1. Oh. Alpha of 1? Wait a minute. Alpha of 1. Add. We lost something here. This is not giving us an output. Natron's gone and done something funky. I'm right. I'm not sure why we're going to look at this, but we're shooting Natron over this. Bad Natron. That's not what I wanted. All right. I've probably disabled something here. Source, let's see, source layer is none. No, source layer should be none. All right, 1 second here. This is not giving us an output. Why are we not getting an output here? This is, source is 0. It's a format. It's giving us a format. We're looking at this. We have a viewer. It's sitting here. Why don't we have a value that we can see? Because we had a mask. Why did we have a mask? I accidentally hooked up the mask. That's what did it. See? Oi, when I put this one in, instead of connecting it to the source in between, I connected it to the mask input, which threw the whole thing off, which broke everything, and that's why it didn't work. Be careful when you're hooking them up that you don't accidentally get it hooked up to the wrong thing. All right, always check your inputs if things are working wrong. All right, now that we've got that back, now we should see it. There we go. Our influence is working correctly. I was like, geez Louise, it was just working. It seemed like it was working, right? All right, so we had it at -2. There we go. We got it back to our -2. let's put this in correctly in here. Just give yourself space so that mask node doesn't actually accidentally get hooked in. All right, so this is a duplicate of it. We enable it right here. There we go. It's in as well, which has pulled that up. So now we pull this in and we disable that one, so we're not looking at the other one, and don't accidentally move it. So this one, we do the same thing. We want to pull it up so that it's closer to the same spot. Maybe reduce the height a wee bit here, and pull it towards center. Maybe pull this over here so it's less influence there. This way, just pull it around a wee bit until we get something that pulls it up in a sympathetic, till we get the sympathetic brow. There we go. Let's see if that's a sympathetic brow or if it looks weird. I think that's a pretty good sympathetic brow. That's coming up pretty nice. Might be a wee bit too heavy-handed here, so I might take this back down to whoops, not negative. I want to take it down to -1, just to be on the safe side. So we've got the brows, and just because we've done this, all right, just to show that we want to do something else, let's do another thing here. We're going to add in this other influence that we had. Oi. All right, pull these back. Let's pull up this. I'm going to take my properties for a second and just set it down to one property at a time so I don't have to keep disabling these. All right, so this property, as we can see, or this radial here, our next influence, so to speak, and all these are is chained, the daisy chained, one after the other, and we just work from where we had what we had as our last result and work from there and create our next bit, and just keep pushing and pulling things. This is like putty, all right? And if we need to pinch, we put two influences. Remember, these things are pushing in a direction, all right? Whatever the direction is, it pushes it all the way across. So it pulls from one side and pushes from the other. So as one side gets pulled and stretched, the other side gets shrunk and pushed together. So if we push two together that are pushing in the opposite directions, then we pinch things together. And if we want to pull things apart, we make them face in the opposite, or them work in the opposite direction. So if I have a negative red, I'll put a positive red that pulls. If I want to pull them apart, I'd have whichever direction, which one was positive, the other would be negative. And if this was negative, by switching it to positive, and this was positive, and I switch it to negative, then they would push together. All right, and the same with the greens. So green would do the same. All right, so it's all about manipulating those things together. So here we have a situation. I'm making his face thin, pulling it around. It's doing weird, funky things because I'm making his cheek. You can see this side. This is shrinking because this is the side that it's pushing towards. So this is the smaller side. And this, from here to here, is shrinking things, and from here to here is pulling things, or is stretching things. Stretch, shrink, stretch, shrink. We can see it, all right? And the reason, all we have to do is, again, change this from negative to positive. If I switch this from negative 0.5 to positive 0.5, and then click on the thing, now this side is stretching. This side between here, the center and here is stretching. And if I go to the other side, it's shrinking. So all we've done is reverse the directions of this by changing the way that the color works. Now, you'll notice that everything is working here. Almost all the influences we've done here are realistic influences. We don't want to move this too far. We've kept all the influences at this point below, very, very small increments, below 0.5. Why are we doing this? There is actually a method to this, and why I wanted us to set this all up, which is if we go to this add node over here, what we can see here is we can actually see our color map. We can see a color map. This means you can take, after we've done our entire animation with this and done all this influencing and so forth, we'll be able to take this and we could actually render this out as a map, so that Natron doesn't actually have to calculate this in a future thing. If we were to reuse this, if for some reason your node structure got really, really, really complex and really, really started to bog down due to complex math, we could render this out as an image map sequence and then just bring it back into Natron and apply it as an image to the iDistort, and it would work perfectly because it's an actual physical image, as long as we set up image, as long as we keep it below 1 and above 0, unless we switch it, we want to make it 32-bit. I'm just trying to keep it in 8-bit format so that it should in theory work. But hey, you know what? Just, that's the reason, that's the logic. I'm trying to make you guys aware of what I'm doing and why. All right, so let's bring this back down. All right. So we want to just one more. We're going to do one more before we start actually animating. So this, instead of making it stretch side to side, I want to pull the cheek up. I want to make him smile a wee bit. So in this case, we don't want to actually modify the red. We'd want to modify the green. In fact, we may actually want to modify the red a little bit. Might want to. I think I want to pull it. I want to pull the red. Let's see which way. One more time. Let me make sure. Red. Yes, pulling. We want to pull the cheek up to this position. I want to pull it from where it was up. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a wee bit of red, and I'm going to add probably or subtract the same amount of green. So I'm going to subtract 2 green and add 2 red. That's 45-degree angle. All right. And what this is going to do is this is going to pull up this cheek a wee bit. And I don't want it to influence that eye too much. I want it to stop before the eye. And I want it to work down. I want to give him it part of his mouth, the edge of his mouth. And I want it to influence out to about this point on his nose and out to there on his face. But the problem is I've moved it down. So I need to readjust and pull things around. And well, it's not going to be perfect. So this means what I'm going to have to do is I need to, my goal is to keep this in as close to the center of his cheek as possible without influencing his eye and while trying to influence the mouth. So that means that I might have to, if I were really going to do this, really trying to animate this, I would probably add something, or add a second one, or you could do something more complex later on involving rotating it, but that makes the whole node graph a wee bit more difficult to work with. All right, so here we go. So this is what we've got. Let's see. This is before, this is after. We've given him, we've raised that cheek so he's got a bit of a smile. Let's duplicate this and make his cheek. We're going to do one more. Just bring up the sort of do a sneery smile thing like I do a lot. But he can't actually sneer. He can't show his teeth because, well, he doesn't actually have teeth in the image. And you can't make things happen unless you start actually superimposing stuff. So we're going to just pull up his smile. We're going to give him a bit of a smile. So we're going to say this one more time. And we're going to control drag that in so that it influences over that. And as we can see, it stacked on top of it. And so what we're going to do is bring this down a wee bit here so that we can influence. We're going to pull on the edge of his mouth up a bit, but I don't want to do it quite as much as I did with his cheek, because your cheek, well, I don't know that I want to do that. I want to bring it down just a smidge. So I'm going to drop this down to drop this down and bring this up to 0.1. All right, so let's see what that influence has done. Let's just see it. Wait a minute, that's not doing what I expected. Oh, I moved the wrong one. I still have my old one. So technically, let's just make sure that we have this in the correct order that we remembered doing it. I'm going to reverse these so that this is the one that's down. So we got I, and you could put, I highly recommend, just to make it sure that you can add labels here. We could say that this is the character's right eye. So we could say right eye on the label. There we go. That way it says it's a radial right eye. And then we can put here radial left eye. And that way, or left eyebrow technically, but good enough for our purposes. So here on the radial, this one's the one we wanted to disable. There we go. That's the one that's pulling up the corner of his mouth. And it's also pulling down the lower part of his cheek, which makes sort of puffs the cheek. And when you do this, there's actually, what happens is your cheek pushes out because this skin here pulls away from your face. So what's happening is as this pulls up here, this pulls down, which is stretching it out in a degree. It's just not pushing it out that way a wee bit. But it's pulling it out. In fact, we could probably push this way a wee bit and get a better result even. All right, let's just take a look at that one more time. There we go. All right, so we've got this, and you say to yourself, all right, but why? We've got this, but we are not animating it. You're just enabling and disabling it. All right, enabling and disabling it. What's everything we need to do? How do we enable and disable? Well, it turns out to animate this stuff is pretty easy. In fact, for right now, we don't need this other. I'm going to get rid of our viewers in a waveform because I want to be able to just view this, and I'm going to enlarge this so that we can get in nice and close, and we can see how to animate this because we're running out of. We've run out of time. Holy smokes, we've gone past. Oh my goodness, I apologize. All right, we're going to do this quick. Last thing, I'm just going to show how you animate this. So for the animation standpoint, all we do is go to frame 0, and we would sit here and we would say, go to the mixed value. Why? We double click on whichever control we're going to be working with, and we tell the mix, we set a key, and we set the key, we want him to raise his eye up. Well, we'll set this mix to 0. Notice the influence has no influence. As I increase it, it animates it. And this is great because if we're working with a diagonal, instead of having to work with 2 values, we only have to work with 1. So this is how we're going to animate it. But there is one catch to this, and I'm going to show you in a minute, all right? We're going to say, oh, I don't know, we're going to just do this relatively quickly. I'll bring it up right about 38. We'll say that's probably actually really long. We'll bring this up to 1, all right? The value up to 1. So there we go. Over the course of here, we've animated it, and we can see that it is going up very slowly. Yes, it's too slow. We'll go to the dope sheet, pull that up, grab that frame. Zoom this out a little bit, grab that frame, pull it in. Should probably be closer to, like, I don't know, 13 frames or so. So anyway, let's just, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Now we can see the eyes moving up. The eyebrows moved up. There we go. We have our animation, except there's one problem. If we go to our curves for this mix node, there's 2 things you have to be aware of. Thing 1, we cannot overdrive these animations because the mix node is capped at a 0 or capped and clipped. We can only go up to a maximum of 1 and down to a minimum of 0. So if we want to do that, if we want to overshoot animations to make things sort of go past the thing, what we would have to do is add a wee bit more influence to our actual values, bring these up a wee bit more. So in other words, let's go back to our point. Let's go to a point where it's actually animated. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back here. Go to the last frame. Come on, where are you? Why are you not? There oh, it is all. All right, so here where I had this set to 2, I might set it to actually -0.3, or excuse me, -0.3, and instead of animating it to 1, I could animate it to down. I could reduce this at that point, and that gives me extra room after it. So 0.7 looks, 0.8 looks pretty good. That gives me a wee bit of extra buffer room here, so I could ease it afterwards. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to do interpolation. We're going to do horizontal here, and that should ease it out. And when at the beginning, we're going to say interpolation horizontal, and that should ease it in. So now it will smoothly transition as we animate it, or as it starts to the end of this movement, and it will look very natural. It won't look suddenly like it's suddenly moving. Muscles don't do that. Nothing does that. When even the fastest movement, there is a wee bit of ease. So what we can do is, as I say, I can ease this out. I'm going to add just one more bit here. I'm going to go out here. I'm going to animate it manually. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to just grab those point, and I'm going to pull it up a wee bit. So I overshoot. I'm going to overshoot that, and then over the course of the animation, I'm going to draw it back a wee bit so that there's like actual life to the actual picture. And I'm going to sit here because I don't like that. I want to set this back to horizontal interpolation. And by doing that, I actually, we'll just keep it interpolation. horizontal. And I'm not going to animate more than that for right now, because this is basically showed the entire process. Oh, and we see right there, you can see I've overshot my animation a wee bit. He's animated and it's quite good. I would stretch this. If I were really doing this, I'd probably pull this out to a wee bit more, something like in here, and then I'd add a point out here around 100, you know, pull that down, and then put something, whoops, out of range, 0 to 1. Oh, of course, this is a 0 to 1. We need to, I told you, we have to work within 0 to 1. So remember, this is 1, 0. We got to really be very careful about how your animation is. I don't know what this value is, but we'll go out. Let's just verify that all our animations is within the places that's good to work with. All right, good enough. We'll just interpolation horizontal. All right, good enough. So now, because this is my system is set to scrub quickly and everything, this should buffer pretty quick, because there we go, and we can see. There's our animation. All right, it's overshooting way too much, in my opinion. Way too much. Oh my goodness, that's mega broad arm, but whatever, we get the point. The whole point is that we were able to animate this. And I could do this to any one of these. All I have to do is animate these, and then when we hit play, we wind up with something like that, and we can see we have complete control over the face. So we can control our entire animation, diagonals, anything, just by animating the mixed value for any one of these nodes. And we have done this, and we've run past the time, but obviously this is an exciting episode with a lot of interesting stuff. And again, we can, if we want to view this, if we go here and we hit 1, we watch this. We can also, as I told you, we can watch our animation now play out. This is our masks that are actually animated. We can actually watch that, and we could render that out. And if we rendered it out to 8-bit, it probably wouldn't be super duper smooth. So I'd recommend keeping this because it's non-animation data or non-color data. Excuse me. Render it, if you ever render this out, render it out to something like an EXR, an EXR sequence, if you really want to, 16-bit EXR sequences. That way, in floating point, that way you can get everything. You should be able to capture all this. That will be perfectly fine. And we've done that in previous episodes, but I wanted to point this out. That way you can render it out as a map sequence, and you have it, and it's saved, and it's permanent, and then you can do whatever. All right. So, again, so there we go. We've seen how to get to this point, how to start animating it. I didn't go through everything. I will pull up actually the original one of these. I think it was this one. I hope it's that one. I don't know. Whoa, that's looking weird. I may have. All right, we should be here. So this is the final animation of the one I did, the final one. And as we can see, all I had was a whole bunch of warps here. I had warp going up, warp going up. The only difference between this is that instead of working between 0 and 1, or -0, instead of working with these starting at 0 and working from -5 to +5, I worked from 0 up to 1 here instead of adding an add node at the end. And that's the only difference between mine. And I honestly, that meant I had to do extra work, because it meant I had to actually physically go in, and when I wanted something to be negative or to be zeroed out, I had to work with it, and it was just a pain in the rumpus. It made it a lot harder to work with. Anyway, so we can see that the end result is the same thing. Here's the mask, and if we play it, we can see it animating over time. And I just wanted to show you that the more of these you use, and we may expand upon that in the future. All right, so now that that's done, I want to show one more thing. I'm going to show yes, I'm going to show what today's goal was one more time, and then I'm going to show what tomorrow's goal or Monday's goal is going to be. All right, so this was our goal was to make something that animated. We're not worried about the text. It was just about getting that eye to move in a way that was natural and nice looking. All right, and we can see it a second time. We can see it moving up, and we can see it smile. Some smile. All right, and again, and then I'm also going to show Monday, in case people are interested. I'll probably be doing individual. So there we go. Whoops, excuse me. That was a bad thing. That wasn't supposed to be there. Mr. Todd Moley's not with me today. He's off doing another thing. All right. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Keep on Natroning.